Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
Historically, evolution has been a gradual process. Now we find ourselves on the fast track. What's causing the accelerated evolution now available to us, and how can we take advantage of it? Mission Evolution Radio TV show is coming to you around the world on the X Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. With us this hour to explore the accelerated evolution of humankind is an old friend of Mission Evolution, Dr. Dawson Church. Dawson is a best-selling science writer and author of 3 award-winning books. The Genie in Your Genes broke new ground by showing that gene expression is influenced by emotions. Mind to Matter is based on hundreds of studies showing that our brains play a key role in constructing the reality around us. In Bliss Brain, Dr. Church demonstrates that we cultivate peak states in our brains. Our brains will rapidly rewire themselves for happiness. He's the founder of the Veteran Stress Solution, which has offered free PTSD treatment for over 22,000 veterans. His website, dawsonchurch.com. Dawson, thanks so much for coming on the show again.
It's always a delight to be here. Thank you, Gwilda.
All right. So, Dawson, what's your background, educational-wise?
Well, I originally studied communications at Baylor University and really enjoyed the whole idea of being able to be effective communicators with other people and the promise of mass media. And of course, we've seen that now proliferate with not just older technologies like radio and TV, but now with virtual technologies. It's amazing how much we're like, as Peter Russell said, the global brain, this interconnected whole. So that's always interested me. I was in book publishing for many, many years, publishing holistic books, holistic health books, wellness books, and then really got into energy therapies many, many years ago and really wanted to share the promise of all these amazing tools we now have. And then as I began to do research on those tools, I found that things like acupressure, energy medicine, meditation can change our bodies radically and quickly. So that's when I wrote The Genie in Your Genes and kicked off that whole new phase of measuring these changes.
It's amazing, isn't it, what's available now? I mean, I think back to when I was in college. It's like what we're experiencing now was science fiction back then. So how'd you become interested in human evolution?
Well, Charles Darwin in his books was focused on the progression of species by natural selection. And of course, when we learned about genes, we realized that species also change by means of gene mutation. And that process is very, very slow. Darwin wrote in one of his books that we'll never, in one human lifetime of maybe 100 years, we would never witness the progress of evolution. And so even like there's one part of the evolutionary record called the Cambrian explosion, when there was an explosion of new life forms. That explosion took 12 million years. So
It's not much of an explosion.
It was an explosion. That was really rapid growth. And so even a newer theory called punctuated equilibrium talks about periods of 5,000 to 10,000 years to have a species change. What we're now showing through epigenetics is that species can change really, really quickly, and that even gene expression can change really quickly in just a few generations. And now the newest research, which I'm writing about for a new book coming out actually in about a year, is showing that we can literally change significant anatomical things in our nervous systems, in our brains, in our biology, actually within weeks. So the pace of change is really rapid right now, and our ability to actually produce health or disease in our bodies by our thoughts, by our beliefs, by energy, turns out to be extremely quick.
Dawson, why do you think we're so accelerated right now? What's contributing to that?
Well, I think we can measure it right now, and I think it's cumulative. I think that, just for example, if we go back like a million years, 2 million years, and look at the implements used by early hominids, they didn't change for long periods of time, millions of years. Then suddenly around 400,000 years ago, we see them changing really, really quickly. What happened 400,000 years ago was that people began to get together and they would share knowledge. And so the number of steps required to create a stone axe went from about 5 steps to about 20 steps really, really quickly as people shared knowledge. That was in the Stone Age. In later ages, as people collaborated, we learned to do things like build cities, build cathedrals, build social structures, and the world began to change even more rapidly. Now, with today's communication technologies, like when the COVID, when the when the sequence of the COVID virus was published, it was published on a Friday. By the following Monday, a German team of scientists had produced the first vaccine. It happened in a weekend.
Oh
They
my.
were working very, very hard in the lab for 4 days, but in a weekend, basically, we had a vaccine. So the pace of change and the process of communication is so powerful nowadays, and that's accelerating it. So we have an advantage we learn about. We tell our friends, we communicate it on social media, we email people, we text it around, and it catches on. And suddenly, like for example, the number of meditators in the world has grown 20-fold, 20x between
My goodness.
1980 and today. People see that their friends who are meditating are happier and more peaceful. They tell others, and suddenly, exponentially, explosively, these new technologies grow, and they're producing an effect on our bodies. One study showed that optimists live on average 10 years longer than pessimists. So these are producing massive shifts in our physiology, in our biology, which again are contributing to much healthier lives and lifespans. So that's the potential of these powerful new psychological and spiritual techniques to affect large numbers of people and the whole human story.
So we have a combination here of cultural base, right? The basic knowledge in the culture. We have expanded communication capabilities, and we have these tools that we're sharing now, and all of that combined is what's creating this acceleration.
Yes, all of those things together are combining. And what they're doing is they're producing now rapid evolution of human bodies and brains. And for example, one very recent study I talk about in this new book I'm working on now, very recently published study, is looking at the size of human brains. And it's finding that I won't geek out on you, Gwilda, and tell you all the exactly how the study was done, other than it was a very, very robust design, but it involved thousands of people. But they were able to measure the difference in the brain size between people born in 1930 and those born in 1970. So 40 years apart, one generation roughly. And they found that the people born later had significantly more mass, about 7% bigger brains, about 15% bigger cortical surface area in their brains. So our brains are growing, and the parts that are growing are really interesting. The executive function of our brains is growing. The memory, learning, and emotion regulation part of our brain is growing. Why is emotion regulation important? If you can't regulate your frustration, your anger, your fear, your doubt, your other negative emotions, you're going to be miserable. If you can regulate them, again, think about that study showing that optimists live 10 years longer than pessimists. Optimists can regulate their emotions. They're hearing about wars and famines and strikes and political upheaval as much as pessimists are, and they have the ability to regulate those emotions. The beauty of it is that when you can downregulate negative emotions, it's the same control knob as you use to upregulate positive ones. So they're not only down regulating their negative emotions, they're also dialing up their gratitude, joy, awe, compassion, and all of these positive emotions as well. And so that's what is able to shift. And it turns out human brains en masse are going through these shifts. It's not just a few brains, it's millions of people. And again, driven largely by stress reduction tools like meditation. So that's the promise that this has for all of us. And again, it's going to produce a very different future than we would have had we not been developing these capabilities.
So is it again a combination of our what we're being exposed to versus what our ancestors were being exposed to. We're being exposed to so much more rapidly. It takes a lot different processing style to be able to just keep up with the internet or the tablets or the cell phones, right? So, do you think that's contributing?
And it's what we point our attention to. Like we all have the same number of minutes every day, every hours of the day, days in the year as everyone else. And some people focus and point their attention to things that are negative, that are disturbing, that are emotionally troubling. And we say pay attention, and it's a really powerful two words. Like it's the most valuable currency we have. It's the most valuable money we have is our attention. We pay it to something, and if you're paying it to all of these negative inputs, then you are degrading your biological function. You're disturbing yourself emotionally, and that again is degrading your biological function. If you pay attention to, there's an ancient text called the Crest Jewel of Illumination, written in the Indus Valley of India almost 2,000 years ago. And the author Shankara said that there's the real and the unreal. The real is the eternal, the real is the unchanging. And if we pay attention to that, then it affects our lives. And he wasn't saying pay attention to it 24/7, but he said meditate in the day, read some inspirational material every day, pay attention to the real part of the day. So now you're redirecting your attention away from all the chaos in the world to this positive thing, maybe just 1 hour a day, but that 1 hour a day of paying attention to positivity, kindness, all of the wonderful things going on in the world
I'm sorry,
is
Dawson. We're
powerful.
going to have to take a commercial break. Dawson and I will return shortly, so don't go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Human potential. Is the sky the limit?
What a fabulous question.
With us discussing potential evolution of humankind is Dr. Dawson Church. Dr. Church is the award-winning author of The Genie in Your Genes, Mind to Matter, and Bliss Brain. Dawson, there's the question for you. So, what's the new human potential movement?
So, what I looked at in Bliss Brain was that very question: is there an upper limit? And what I was looking at was brain development in Tibetan monks, because these are people who have spent literally decades and done tens of thousands of hours of meditation, and we can see changes in their brains. Now, the way that the studies go is they compare the experience of people and the brain structure of people who have meditated, say, for 50,000 hours with ones who've done a mere 20,000 hours of meditation in their lives. And what they find is that there is, in terms of brain structure and brain evolution, there is no upper limit. Even at 60,000 hours of meditation, those brains keep changing. And the way they keep changing is really interesting. The mid prefrontal cortex, which is right behind our eyes over here, behind our foreheads, that part of the brain becomes less and less active. And that's the main part of the brain involved in suffering. When we suffer, like people with major depressive disorder, that is the part of the brain that's highly active. They're thinking about the self, they're thinking about their bad things of their past, problems that may happen in the future. So the mid-prefrontal cortex is really active in people with major depressive disorder. In those Tibetan monks, that just gets quieter and quieter and quieter. Suffering goes down. The amygdala, the brain's fire alarm, the brain, this crucial part of the stress response, that part of the brain shrinks and shrinks and shrinks in these highly developed monks, but it can shrink in you and me in just a few weeks of meditation practice. And the other part of the brain that's notable for shrinking in these monks is the nucleus accumbens, which is one of the centers involved in addiction and craving. So it's highly active in people craving fentanyl, people craving heroin, even chocolate. The nucleus accumbens is active. That just starts to shrink in these monks, and their brain changes keep on happening throughout their lives. They get happier and happier and happier. Even when they're getting old and their bodies are shutting down, they're still really happy people. So at least from the standpoint of neuroscience, there is no upper limit, Gwilda.
Well, you were talking. Does size really matter? Because you were talking about the brain growing, and now you're talking about it shrinking.
Yeah, you want to have certain parts shrink and certain parts grow. So the parts that typically are growing are emotion regulation. Actually, there are four parts. There are four main brain regions that grow. One is emotion regulation. If you cannot regulate your frustration, your negative emotions, your negative thinking, it's really hard to have a happy life. And there's tissue that does this. It's really well developed. It's big, and that grows in these meditators. Another part of the brain that grows is the part of the brain that regulates that mid-prefrontal cortex, that focus of suffering. And so there are other parts of the brain that dial that down. Those parts of the brain grow. The compassion part of the brain grows, and also the attention circuits grow. These meditators have they can sit there and focus on a candle flame for 5 hours at a time. I'm not quite that good. I can do 15 minutes. I think I'm a hero, but your attention circuit after a while grows. You can really pay attention. So now you aren't distracted by your knee itching and the mosquito buzzing around your head and all the other things that otherwise distract us. And you want to develop that kind of a brain with those parts of the brain big and robust, and those addiction and stress parts small.
So, is there anything outside of meditation that has the same effect?
The new concept I'm really exploring and promoting is called spiritual intelligence. Spiritual intelligence. And what it is, I define it as the ability of our local human consciousness, the small I, this temporary I that exists for a few years, decades, then it's gone, to connect with the large I, consciousness itself. We have an individual human consciousness. So I say, you're Gwilda, I'm Dawson. We have a sense of who we are as a local being. But there's a field of non-local consciousness that is infinite, and we as a local finite consciousness can connect with that. So in meditation we connect with that, but we also connect with it when we're, for example, in nature. Just take a walk through nature, and everybody's had that experience at some point by walking in a forest or watching a beautiful sunset. Even monkeys, certain species of monkeys, will drop what they're doing when the sky lights up and has the beautiful sunset. They'll stare at it. Even other primates have this ability to be awed by beauty.
So,
So
so Dawson,
do
are
these
we
things.
talking about the unified field here, where we all come together and become one, and that would include the trees, the monkeys, the sunset?
Yeah. And so for years, science has been searching for unified field theory. We've never quite agreed on one. And there are four fundamental forces that we talk about, and they've looked for a unified field. But it turns out that consciousness actually affects all four of those forces of physics. So in my book, Mind to Matter, I explain consciousness as that unified field.
So the unified field is within and without us.
It's within and without us, and the variable is, are we in touch with it? If we're distracted, if we are focused on all the things going on out there, or in our own personal lives, our bodies, then we distract ourselves from that. How much time a day do you give? I'm asking everyone listening now, how much time a day do you set aside for what really matters, that is that infinite field? It may only be 15, 20 minutes a day. That's enough. So make that your practice, and then you are able to participate in that great unified consciousness.
So what do you do with those 25 minutes a day? If I know meditation you're saying works. What else could you be doing?
Ironically, the great texts of the East say it's as simple as the breath. They all point to the breath. Yoga points to the breath, meditation points to the breath, many other schools point to the breath. And so simply focusing on each in breath and each out breath mindfully is enough to shift your attention. Time in nature is so powerful. It's epigenetic. Research has shown that even time in a small city park in the middle of an urban environment will shift your gene expression. You don't have to be roaming the forest. So time in nature is powerful. Love, love, hugs. Like my wife and I, before she leaves the house each day to go, she teaches art and does other things outside the house. I work at home. We just hug each other. We look into each other's eyes. We spend time together. And you think, why do it every day? I mean, you've been married forever. You'll be married for, have a lot long you're alive. Why focus every day on that? Because that dropping into your body and that feeling of connection is powerful. Listening to other people, tuning into other people, being empathetic, and having strong social bonds, again, produces a whole plethora of genetic shifts in your body. So there are many ways we can do it besides meditation. Add them all together, and you start to really move the needle in terms of health and happiness.
So you saying that the monks, their brains were growing within their lifetime. Is this across the board? I mean, you could measure what's going on with the monks as far as their brain size.
Yes, we measured in monks, but the cool thing is I did one randomized controlled trial, and we measured it in ordinary people, just people off the street who volunteered to go to university and have MRI scans made of their brains. And then we handed them two tracks. One of them was a placebo track. One was a special meditation track that has them breathe, really be in the body. It's called eco meditation, ECO meditation. And the eco meditation group, again, all I had to do was listen to this track every day for a month. When they got back to the university lab after 30 days, went back in the MRI, and we ran the results of this large group of people who just did this non-monk activity for 20 minutes a day, the results were astonishing. We found the same anatomical brain changes starting to happen in their brains as in the monks' brains, with an explosion of growth in the compassion center, the joy center, the awe center, and a quieting of that mid prefrontal cortex, which is the main culprit in our suffering. So you don't have to be monk to do this. You just use an effective meditation method like eco meditation, and you find that rapidly you start to change your experience and your brain.
One thing I'm seeing in what you're saying is that all of these things seem to bring a person to the present moment rather than worrying about the future or dreading dredging up the past. Am I accurate in that?
Absolutely. That mid prefrontal cortex is what constructs our sense of self. The self is very focused on the bad things that happened to me yesterday, the bad things that might happen to me tomorrow. It is anywhere except the present. All of these other activities bring you into the present and quiet that mid prefrontal cortex. So, yeah, anything that brings you to the here and now, mindful walking, mindful breathing, mindful hugging, mindful conversation, mindful media like the show.
Well,
All
thank
bring
you.
you there.
We're just about out of time in this segment, but you were just saying mindful, mindful, mindful. I've heard a lot about mindful. What is mindful?
You can do it's simply bringing your attention into the present and being there, showing up for whatever you're doing. If you're eating at every bite mindfully. When you're breathing mindfully. When you're in the space you're in that space, whatever it might be, and you have your full attention and you're there in the present moment.
So it's being really experiential. Um, is mindful about what you're experiencing and where you're focusing?
It is, and it's ironic it's called mindful because it's actually getting the mind out of the way. Your mind is not
Yeah,
working
that's
very
what has
hard
me
at all.
confused.
You can see
Yes.
a real shutdown of the parts of the brain that work the hardest when you're thinking.
Gotcha. So if you're mindful, you don't have the brain going. That seems like uh, oxymoron or something,
I
right?
know, it is. It's a paradox, but yeah, to be mindful is to be showing up in the present moment, and the thinking brain tends to go to sleep. So in flow states, and great athletes, and great scientists, and great artists, we see this, that the thinking brain is actually very, very quiet, and then they're functioning at their peak
It's amazing how world works when you are at that space too. Everything just kind of flows together in a good way.
in a good
It
way.
is, it is that wonderful time. Dawson and I will be right back to continue our discussion. Please stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org, and we're coming to you on the X Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. Do we need to rethink meditation? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing the impact of conscious mental practices is Dr. Dawson Church. His website, dawsonchurch.com. Dawson, we were really getting into the benefits of meditation and similar practices. Um, so, what's your vision? How is that going to play into our evolution?
It's playing into our evolution because of the number of people meditating right now. So the CDC in America collects data on people who are meditating, praying, all kinds of other practices, and they publish that data. So we know year by year how many people, what proportion of the population is meditating. The European Union collects similar data, and a lot of other countries do. And what has happened in the last 40 years is absolutely stunning. So 1% of the population was meditating in 1980, roughly speaking. 1% of the people in the world were meditating. And as we go back in history, we find that 1% is pretty consistent, going back 1,000 years. What began to happen around 1985, 1990 is the number began to creep up. So by 2004, it had crept up to around 5% of people meditating in developed countries. Now that's a fivefold increase, which is a big increase. Today, 20% of people are meditating, and that is producing these physical changes in the brain among large numbers of people. And the way this is showing up is primarily in compassion. And we see a lot of uncompassionate behavior in the world. We see a huge rise in compassionate behavior in the world in various ways. And breakthroughs in human compassion that used to take 100 years or more. I mean, the abolition of slavery, giving women the vote, these things all took 100 years for us to change our minds. Now, that was a brief period of time, 100 years. Slavery had been around for millions of years. Suddenly, within 100 years, it was gone. Now we see things like big compassionate initiative changes happening in 5, 10, 15 years, gay marriage, legalization of marijuana, respect for disabilities, animal rights. I mean, all kinds of, there are just dozens of things going on. The number of nonprofits formed each year in the US has gone up 500% between
Wow.
1980 and today to do good work in the world. So even though there's all this bad stuff going on, I'm not denying any of it, the human beings as a whole are becoming more compassionate. This is going to produce big positive changes in society in the next decade.
Do the larger numbers of people set up a energetic field that then promotes the very thing that they're doing?
Absolutely. And the great Jesuit philosopher Teilhard Chardin talked about the psychosphere of the earth, the field of consciousness of the earth. And it's changing because now we have far more people who are compassionate than we had even 40 years ago. So that is changing the psychosphere of the planet. And you can feel that. You know, we have some wars going on right now. We know those wars are wrong. Everybody knows that war has completely lost its value as a way of settling national disputes. So even these people involved in the wars just know in their hearts that this is not the way to go anymore. And so we as a species are changing. You're going to see a lot more of these initiatives happening over the next while. And it's all the energy field of the planet and that psychosphere of the planet shifting for the positive.
Is there something going on outside of the planet that's also affecting this? I know that, say, in the Mayan calendar, they would register what's going on the planet by the ages, but the ages are related to our relative positioning in the galaxy. Do you see any of that as having an impact?
I wonder, like, for example, because we now know that there are billions of stars and billions of stars that might have life forms on them, and we don't know what those life forms are like. We haven't made large-scale contact with any of them yet, but they're all part of the same psychosphere, the psychosphere of the cosmos. And we know, for example, when we leave our small, limited self, our local consciousness, and we move into oneness with non-local consciousness, we know that we're part of this infinite field. And so are there these other beings out there that we might one day make contact with in consciousness? We have no way of knowing right now, but it just seems that it's possible, and at some point we might have conscious contact with them. We may have physical contact with them as well, and so we aren't alone in the universe. And you know, when you're in meditation and deep in that space of connection with that conscious universe, you feel love, you feel joy, you feel oneness. That's the main characteristic of that field, the sense of oneness. I am one with something larger than myself. And that is so nurturing. And we know that we're one with everything in that state, including whatever else there is out there.
So, but the key, the price of admission is you have to be here now. Is that accurate?
You have to be here now. And then that's where all of those mindfulness practices come in handy. And so we aren't there all the time. We aren't mindful always. There are all these distractions. And so we have to bring ourselves back to it over and over and over again. But the beauty, Gwilda, is that it gets easier in time. Like you decide to break a habit and you break it once, one day, and then you stray, but then you repeat it, and you repeat it over and over and over again. You're building new neurons in the brain. In Bliss Brain, I have a really amazing image of a scanning electron microscope showing two neurons that are chatting together, and they're kind of shaking together as they fire together. They get closer and closer, and they shake hands and wire together. And then you look at the timestamp at the bottom, and it tells you 12 seconds. Every 12 seconds, you're holding that positive thought. You're being mindful. You're inculcating this new habit. Every 12 seconds, you're building a new neural pathway. And so, bit by bit, you're replacing all of your suffering with the neural pathways of compassion, awe, gratitude, and joy. So it's just doing it over and over and over again till you wire those changes in your brain. Then you have a creative, joyful, and resilient brain.
As we do this in mass, more of us and more of us, is it changing the frequency of the societies?
Yeah, it shows up as large-scale social change in time. And initially, it's, Margaret Mead said, never think that a small group of committed people cannot change the world. It is the only thing that ever has. So we stay with that vision, and eventually the world does begin to change. I mean, who could have thought that about 20 people in Britain in 1790 could lead to the abolition of slavery? But just a handful of people did. Women's rights. Elizabeth Cady Stanton. We're coming up on the 200th anniversary of that women's rights movement. Small group of people meeting over tea in upstate New York, and they changed the world. So don't think that your little effort is inconsequential. It's part of a much larger social movement. And it's all the bad stuff that gets the headlines, but there's so much good stuff out there as well that is flying under the radar, that is evidence of these positive social shifts.
There's one thing I've noticed, and I've read it and heard about it, is that when you have a person that spent a lot of time meditating and developing their ability to be present, when they are in the presence of other people, people are really drawn to them because there's an aura about them of peacefulness. Would you speak to that a little bit?
So the peacefulness begins initially in our own inner experience. And as we chart people in these states, we find that they feel this profound sense of inner peace and absolutely ecstatic inner joy. These states, and when we measure them using an EEG, for example, we find that they can be hitting 7 times the level of those joyful brainwaves that the average person hits. So they're extraordinarily happy. When they're with other people, that intensifies the effect. They can get there more easily. Do it as a group. Research shows that group meditation produces faster brain change than individual meditation. So groups definitely are able to help us get there further. And what I really wonder is if energetic groups can do that too. Like I meditate sometimes, and I tune into all the people meditating in the world. Now, I'm not there in the room with them, but maybe there is a group effect just by being conscious of our global family all doing this. And so again, we're having massive personal change, massive brain change, massive group change, massive energy change, massive psychosphere change. And you can also recruit that on days you aren't feeling good. Maybe there are days when it's hard to get to that place of meditation. Then just visualize, just tune into everyone meditating right now and realize that you're part of this whole. And suddenly that's going to give you the energy to move to that level, which you can't do by yourself. So definitely doing it as a collective is making an impact.
So we talked about, and we're just about out of time in this segment, but we talked about how the personal brain, the neurons will move together and rewire. Is that happening in the collective brain as well?
It is happening in the brains of millions of people simultaneously now. Again, 20 times more people meditating than there were in 1980. And one recent study found that human brains actually are getting larger. They found that just in the last few years, there's been a 7% increase in the size of the human brain, 15% increase in the surface area of the human brain in just the last few years.
My goodness, we are accelerated, aren't we? So We have to be mindful, if you will, of what we're feeding ourselves right now, don't we? If we're moving really quickly in the growth area, we can really deteriorate as rapidly as well, I would suspect.
We can. If you're focused on the negative stuff, it releases a flood of cortisol in your bloodstream. I've done several clinical trials of cortisol, and you think a negative thought, immediately you trigger the stress response and you start to affect your body. So absolutely, either negative or positive thoughts affect us. And it doesn't take like a minute. It's seconds. Those genes click on and they start to flood our bodies with all the neurochemistry of stress. So
Oh my gosh.
absolutely, either good or bad, your thoughts are affecting you rapidly.
Well, it's that magic moment again. We need another station break. Please stay with us as Dawson and I continue to explore the evolution of humankind. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Is it possible to consciously alter the human gene expression of future generations? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Dr. Dawson Church. His website, dawsonchurch.com. So, there's the next question. Can we actually alter the expression of future generations by what we're doing today?
Yeah, so the future generation question is really interesting. What will happen with our children? And we are obviously, as we raise children, are having an enormous effect on their psyches and on the emotional space that we provide for them. And that's changed very rapidly in the last while. Like when I was a kid in the 1950s, things like child abuse, domestic violence weren't spoken of. In fact, it was regarded as shameful not to do those things, but to talk about them. It was called airing your dirty laundry in public. You didn't want to do that as a family. So children were raised in this very different environment then, and now that's changed enormously and vastly. So we're going to be providing our children with a much more positive environment than we saw even 50, 75 years ago, and that is affecting the future. And it's also going to affect large scale social trends as these children grow up and then are in government, politics, law, education, all these other fields, and they're going to be able to shift the needle even further. And so I think that the world again is on a very positive trajectory. Not that there aren't all these problems we have to solve. I mean, we have climate change, we have social injustice, we have income inequality, we have war, we have all of these issues. But when we have, again, I mentioned how the human brain is growing. When we have bigger brains, more capable brains, more creative brains, more resilient brains to apply to those problems, Gwilda, we're going to have a much better chance at solving them than if we bring caveman brain to the party.
So Dawson, would you go through the would you go through the mechanics, please, of how we are altering the gene expression of the future?
Yeah, so when we have a thought, we that thought triggers gene expression in our bodies. And for example, there's a gene that triggers the production of cortisol. If I have a negative thought, if I just think about a negative event in my life, then that triggers the production of cortisol. And we have people now who are thinking negative thoughts and really driving their cortisol high. So you want to, again, have this facility of emotion regulation to regulate those thoughts and not be producing that cortisol. That gene that produces cortisol is being turned on. When you meditate, when you become mindful, when you breathe, a totally different gene gets turned on. It shuts down cortisol production and it upregulates the production of our body's cell repair hormones. Now, suddenly, our bodies are repairing themselves, our cells are communicating effectively, all kinds of good things are happening, driven purely by thought. So, all of these effects work themselves out in terms of gene expression, and vast numbers of genes change. In one study, people doing EFT acupressure tapping for an hour with a therapist, 72 genes were changed. Genes to do with helping our bodies regulate throat cancer, esophageal cancer, breast cancer, and prostate cancer were all improved. Genes helping our bodies regenerate the cell lining, genes helping our bodies create good connections between our neurons in our memory centers of the brain. So all of these improvements happening all these genes changing just by consciousness alone. That's our big leverage point.
So again, help me understand this. We used to think of genes, they're what you get, right? You get brown eyes, you get red hair, you get whatever. Okay. But what you're expressing to me is that they're there, all sorts of genes are there, but they have to either be turned on or turned off. So it's like if you want hot water, you turn on the hot faucet. You don't always have hot water just because it's available. Is that how genes actually work?
Yeah, so about maybe 15% of our genes or thereabouts are fixed, and those are things like height and eye color. But the remaining 85% are variable. They respond. I mean, if I have a bite of an apple, the genes that are responsible for turning on the production of hydrochloric acid in my stomach turn on. So a lot of our genes are variable. And so those are the ones that we want to influence, especially our stress genes. They turn on and off really, really quickly. So you want to take control of the process. And so that 85% that is variable is highly under your control. One recent study of Alzheimer's patients that I'm talking about in my new book, Spiritual Intelligence, I talk about this Alzheimer's study, and it found that when Alzheimer's patients learn meditation, the researchers thought, well, maybe it's going to slow cognitive decline. It's going to slow the shrinkage of their brains to learn meditation. They found it did not slow cognitive decline, did not reverse brain shrinkage. It completely eliminated it, and their brains grew. Their brains grew, the memory centers of their brains grew, the learning centers grew, the emotion regulation centers grew in these people. These were Alzheimer's patients with rapidly shrinking brains. The shrinkage stopped, the brains began to grow. So all kinds of things are happening in our body when we practice these wonderful stress reduction techniques.
So it's like we're sitting in the bathroom weeping because there's no water, simply because we haven't turned on the faucet, right?
Entirely under our control.
So Dawson, it's that time in the show when I get to ask you, what's your mission?
My mission, I think, is to be the love and joy I came here to be. And for me, that takes the form of speaking and science. And that's just the languages I love. So I love being with people. I love teaching meditation. I love teaching stress reduction techniques. We train thousands of people every year. And just doing that fills me with joy, being a conduit for the joy. We all came here with this immense potential. For many of us, it's just sidetracked by stress. And so when you aren't in that stressful state, the magic, the love, the joy, the compassion that you came here to share and express is freely available. It flows through you. You meditate in the morning. You can't wait to get to work and have those things start to flow through your external activities as well. So that's why I'm here, and why I just wake up every day just overflowing with bliss.
So what do you have to say to those people that go, well, I don't know, meditation might be against my religion, or it's a scary thing, or it's woo woo, or, what do you say to them?
Read the facts, read the science, because there are a lot of opinions. But one of the cool things about science is that we hear ideas, we hear beliefs, and then you just look at the science and look at the facts. So in all of my books, I just give you the facts. And if you have fears, science is great at dissipating them. Now, there are fears that are valid, and so science will tell you that as well. But it'll show you that most of the things we're afraid of, most of our arguments for not taking our well-being seriously are not valid. And the truth is, we live in a world of love and beauty. We can do so much to improve the quality of our lives and the lives of those around us, that we want to just keep on doing it every single day.
Um, there's a lot of talk about how we create our reality. Would you speak to that a little bit as it relates to epigenetics and what's going on?
I wrote a whole book about that called Mind to Matter. And in Mind to Matter, I show the enormous amount of research showing that what we think of as external reality is actually largely constructed through our brains by energy fields around us. And so as we change our minds, change our brains, the external reality around us changes. And there really is a powerful effect in the world around us based on changing our thoughts and feelings. There are a lot of studies and a lot of stories in Mind to Matter about cancer. And just like my new book, Spiritual Intelligence, a lot of studies about Alzheimer's, that previous book, Mind to Matter, about people who, like one woman who got a terminal diagnosis. They told her she had uterine cancer and had metastasized. She was stage 4. They told her that she had about 6 months to live. And she just began to change her mind. She shifted the way she thought. She began to nurture herself. She just said, I'm not going to let another negative thought come into my mind. She was rigid about that. She nurtured herself. She took long walks. She meditated. A year later, she walked into her doctor's office, cancer-free. And I interviewed her over a decade later, and that was still the case. So our minds, our consciousness has the ability to heal our bodies. And there are so many stories in my books of people healing even terminal diseases and autoimmune diseases, seemingly incurable things. One woman on a call with me 2 weeks ago said, Dawson, I had fibromyalgia for 46 years. I'm so grateful to you and your work. I no longer have fibromyalgia. It is just potent to have these available of these cures to us. And I so want people to learn that it's possible to shift our external reality of our bodies and our lives and use these tools.
It's so important, and we're just about out of time in the entire show. Real quickly, what would you say to the future? What do you see coming?
I believe that many big systems are going to change. I believe politics is going to change. I believe medical care is going to change. We're not training therapists in the Veterans Administration. They've invited us to train therapists inside there in these woo-woo techniques because they work. They
They were.
relieve PTSD. So we'll find them more institutionalized. We'll find them in Kaiser Permanente. We've already trained people in the Cleveland Clinic and Johns Hopkins and other medical systems. So that training in the system is going to keep on going, and people in medical care will have the chance to experience the power of energy therapies. So that's
Well,
going to be.
that's wonderful news. Absolutely. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Dawson, thanks so much again for being on the show.
It's been a joy, Wilda. Thank you.
Mhm. Our guest this hour has been Dr. Dawson Church, a best-selling science writer and the author of 3 award-winning books. He's also the founder of Veteran Stress Solution. To find out more about Dawson, where you can find his books and all he has to offer, visit his website at dawsonchurch.com. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. To enjoy more our past archives or to find more information, visit us at www.missionevolution.org. But please join us here next time. This mission is going to continue, bringing information, resources, and support to an evolving world.